You're listening to UNITEDWESTRIKE.com radio. Don't buy, don't comply. Ask why. UNITEDWESTRIKE.com radio.
Thanks for everyone for coming back to the UNITEDWESTRIKE.com radio marathon. I'm your host for this part of the show. I'm Matt Navarro, and this is the inaugural episode of the New World Odor Report. You heard me right. I said New World Odor because it stinks. And I'd just like to remind our audience about our call for international strike, which is the anniversary of the strike we held last year that was so successful, of April 15th. We started last year with taxfree15.com and made a splash last April 15th. So this year, we've grown up and we've become UNITEDWESTRIKE.com, and we're uniting people from around the world on our monthly marathons, and remind everyone that on the 15th of every month, don't buy, don't comply, and ask why. We start our broadcast early in the morning from Europe, transition into the United States, and we normally have participation from people in South America. But for this inaugural episode of the New World Odor Report, I'm glad to be talking to the guests we'll be bringing on here shortly. We'll be talking about the police state and fusion centers and activism. We'll have with us, we're a couple of great activists. First is Catherine Bleish. She's from the Liberty Restoration Project. You've seen her on Jesse Ventura's Police State Conspiracy Theory Show, Gary Frenchie's Camp FEMA, and she's on the radio regularly around the country, recently with Joyce Riley on the Power Hour. And we'll have John Bush, who also appeared with Catherine on Jesse Ventura's Conspiracy Theory Police State episode from defuse.org. So Catherine and John, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Hello.
Hi, great to have you here. So Catherine, and we'll get to John in just a sec. Give us a little background. You're such a young person, and you've done so much in just a short amount of time. How did you get involved in this? What has been your activities, and kind of bring us up to date to where you're at and what you're up to?
Okay, I was actually initially involved in the Ron Paul campaign starting in the summer of 2007. I was toying around with the anti-war movement and volunteering for the United Nations and learning about Ron Paul. I became very active in Republican politics. I went to the RNC in 2008 as a delegate from Missouri. That didn't go so well, obviously, for anybody who paid any attention. So I sort of gave up on partisan politics and started moving toward focusing on our state legislature in Missouri. We had some really great successes with 10th Amendment legislation. And then, of course, the infamous MIAC report, the strategic report on the modern militia movement, which was released by one of our fusion centers in Missouri that profiled activists just like myself and John and the people listening to this show, people who were concerned with the IRS, the Federal Reserve, people who were supporters of Ron Paul, Chuck Baldwin, Bob Barr, people who considered themselves a libertarian or who were members of Campaign for Liberty. And I was very active in the pushback against that, and in the process ran into John Bush. He asked me to come on his radio show. He was fighting fusion centers down here in Texas, where I now reside. And we ended up teaming up together at the Continental Congress of 2009. And if you read the Articles of Freedom that were published at that event, Operation Defuse is basically just a big chunk out of the privacy section. And John and I really had a lot of influence over that. And so we took off driving across the country this time last year, visiting fusion centers, showing up at their door if they refused to meet with us, and filing open records requests, interviewing their staff, doing activist trainings, and really learning a lot in the process, attending some of their conventions, just meeting with these people face to face, and really studying the belly of the beast, literally. And now I am living in Austin, Texas, working on my career as a consultant. I like to help liberty activist groups make sure that they are finding success in their activism. And I'm working on a little web design career as well, But I'm still doing a lot, I think, to support the liberty and freedom movement, mostly in that I'm trying to live free myself right now.
Excellent. Okay, we'll go back to the MIAC report because I want to spend some time getting more information about that. John, can you give us a little bio about who you are, where you come from, and what got you into all this mess with the New World Order?
Yeah, well, I'm from Austin, Texas, born and raised, and back in 2002, I came across a documentary on cable access channel from by Alex Jones, 9/11 Road to Tyranny, and since then I've been questioning the official story of what happened that day. That led me down the rabbit hole to learn about push for global governance, and then the Ron Paul campaign came around, and I was introduced to libertarianism, got involved in the local campaign. And we did the same thing, much like a Liberty Restoration Project did. We decided to continue the fight, but take it to the local and state level where we believed we would have a more effective and efficient ability to influence government. And we've been doing that with Texans for Accountable Government. We formed about 2.5 years ago. TagTexas.org is the website, pushing back against police officer administered blood withdrawals, a lot of DWI tyranny, sobriety checkpoints last legislative session. We've really formed a lot of coalitions. We consider ourselves transpartisan, so we're trying to work with organizations from the left and right and all sorts of different political interest groups that see eye to eye on similar issues, primarily privacy and civil liberties. And just as Kat was fighting the MIAC up in Missouri, we pushed back against the Austin Regional Intelligence Center, a brand new regional local fusion center, and managed to get some pretty strong privacy protections and prohibitions on that fusion center. And since then, just been hanging out in Austin. Kat talked about Operation Defuse, traveling around the country. We're gearing up for the 2011 legislative session here to push back. Once again, we're going to have some bills introduced we can chat about that are going to provide protections for all 7 fusion centers here in Texas. And then I also helped to found a nonprofit. It's called the Foundation for a Free Society. The website's myfreesociety.com. And it's really about educating people about the philosophy of liberty, giving them skills on how to communicate the philosophy of liberty to their community and to elected representatives, and also providing resources, tools, and advice on how they can live a more free life, become self-sufficient, learn about self-defense and preparedness, survivalism, modern survivalism, and really just been kicking it and trying to live as freely as possible and enjoying life. It's free man.
Well, sounds like you're a busy guy, but it sounds like you're on the same track as folks here at UNITEDWESTRIKE.com. We're all about empowering the individual to become more self-sufficient and remove their support for the New World Order system. We all need to withdraw that support that enslaves ourselves. The more we feed into that, the more they use that against us to enslave us. So it looks like you're on the same track.
Yeah, I think the freedom movement as of late, I think we're seeing an evolution of libertarianism and those seeking to live more freely. But we were kind of caught, just as the Tea Party was caught up in and still caught up in, a reactionary paradigm where we defined ourselves as being anti-government. And what I think we need to start doing is start being pro-freedom and living as free people and living as consistently as possible to the philosophy of liberty. Even if it means that we got to, be at a little risk or discomfort, I think, if we don't stand up now, the technology and the police state that we're going to chat about, the surveillance state, they have the ability to really prevent mankind from embracing their inherent freedoms. And it's been a nonstop struggle since the beginning of civilization. And I think we have the ability now to communicate, and people are starting to awaken and realize and embrace their freedom. So I think we're living in some really exciting times. It's great to be alive right now.
I agree with you. It's exciting, yet I don't know. I don't want to say scary because I don't want to be scared. I don't want to live in fear. But it's a very troubling time that we really do need to focus now, put our efforts together now, step forward, because the planet, our species, needs us to do so right now. So we're on the same track. Okay, so let's start getting into the police state. Either one of you, take this question and run with it. from your perspective, from your research and your involvement with all of this, what is the police state? Describe what that looks like.
I would describe the police state as the actual force mechanism behind the decisions being made by those who think they have power over the rest of us. And so those would be, your police, particularly those that are instituting things like driver's license checkpoints in Missouri or blood withdrawals on the side of the highway, in other areas. It's going to be the actual implementation of force behind the law or the regulations or whatever it is that they are trying to enforce. And it's pretty big right now. People aren't aware that the FBI database in 2011, this year, expands to contain facial recognition technology. So this is the year you're going to start to see law enforcement potentially processing people through prison by scanning their face. You're already seeing it at customs and on the borders. This is the police state, the actual technology and force behind the mechanisms they're trying to use to control us. That's my view of that. What do you think, John?
Yeah, it's definitely force. The essence of government is force, and the police state is any institution, any individual, any organization that uses coercion in order to, they're not even really enforcing the law because what they enforce is perverted. So really, in order to protect the establishment and in order to protect the status quo, and it's interesting when you explore the Fusion Center system and the philosophy behind it and the Southern Poverty Law Center and the ADL and all these groups that attach themselves to it, the organizations and individuals and activists that they target most are those who choose to operate outside of the system or who choose to peacefully, nonviolently not comply with something that they see to be immoral. So I think those institutions, the police state is surfacing right now, and it has been, and we see its worst, most disgusting manifestation in opposition to people that do just that because they're threatened by it because these people are seeing beyond the monopoly and they see through the veil, really.
Okay, so let's start down this trail then. Let's start with the MIAC report. What is it? What was in it? Because you're talking about them targeting, individuals, groups who aren't violent, but just disagree with the New World Order system. And describe for us what was in there and how it affects us, and then lead that into the fusion centers. How does all this tie in with the fusion centers?
Okay, well, I'll start off with explaining the MIAC. MIAC stands for MIAC, Missouri Information Analysis Center. It is one of 4 fusion centers in the state of Missouri. There are 4 of these fusion centers. They're a DHS initiation, Department of Homeland Security. They give grants to fund the creation, often in full, sometimes in part, of these fusion centers where law enforcement basically collect data in an effort to create intelligence so that they can predict and prevent future crime. And that can be elaborated on further. I'll explain the MIAC report really quickly. The MIAC report, the infamous MIAC report, is actually one of 13 reports in the state of Missouri. 11 of them, the Liberty Restoration Project received through open records request. A 12th Operation BGs has, and a 13th is yet to be seen by anybody that I'm aware of. So I am curious what's on that one. But this report that it was like the shot heard around the world, was a document that profiled Ron Paul supporters, Chuck Baldwin supporters, Bob Barr supporters, libertarians, conservatives, people who were concerned about the, quote, New World Order, people who didn't like the Federal Reserve banking system, who didn't like the IRS tax scheme. They listed all of these qualifiers of ideas and perspectives that really overlap and intertwine within our movement on various levels, depending on, the different groups that you're interacting with, but really had a lot of overlap for myself and a lot of my peers. It was quite upsetting because law enforcement in Missouri was told to think of people espousing these ideas as potential radical, violent militia members, which, you know, I had met militia members twice, and it was at the gun show, and they had a booth, and we had a really great discussion, and I thought, you know, they were operating constitutionally. I didn't have any problem with it, but I most certainly am not a danger or a violent threat. And so it was quite upsetting, and people all over the country stood up against this absolute injustice, and thankfully the report was retracted, and the head of the department was asked to step down. He now has another taxpayer-funded job, but, you know, that's the way things work. So
did the governor...
My report.
Okay, so didn't the governor issue a statement regarding that report?
Yes, first he came out in support of it. Now, they began authoring it under the previous governor, Governor Blunt, and I did ask him about this at a Q&A at a conference 2 springs ago, and he just kind of danced around it. But it was actually issued to law enforcement under the current governor, Governor Jay Nixon, and it took a year and a half for them to respond, the governor's office, to respond to our open records request that we sent to them. We just got it about a week and a half ago. But yeah, first he came out in support of it, and then finally came out and condemned it after a few weeks.
Well, it took him long enough, but, you know, I learned about it on the Alex Jones show, so I suppose that leak came, you know, simultaneous to your getting hold of the documents. John, what can you shed light on? Just go ahead.
That's how I heard about it, too.
Right. So, John, what can you shed light on, and how does that tie in with the report that you saw out of Texas? And then let's roll that into how that's used by the fusion centers. Describe these fusion centers and why we need to be concerned about them.
Sure. There's over 72 of them across the country. They are created through Department of Homeland Security grants, all too often subverting the state legislature or any legislative bodies whatsoever. Many of them are carried out as administrative fiat. And one of the things that I think should be most concerning to activists or individualists, libertarians, freedom fighters, constitutionalists, patriots, anybody that, threatens the status quo, which is control, is this whole new philosophy of intelligence-led policing, which is something that they're promoting and is really at the heart of the fusion center system. And as Catherine mentioned earlier, they gather up as much information as possible, information that has nothing to do with crimes. Before, they used to have criminal predicate before they could gather information. Now, the new paradigm, they even call on law enforcement in some of their training manuals. This guy, David L. Carter, he's a PhD. He wrote the book on fusion centers, his doctoral dissertation. And he says you should collect information in order to establish criminal predicate. So it used to be you get reasonable suspicion, Fourth Amendment. You start gathering information because you have reasonable suspicion to believe somebody is committing a crime or planning to commit a crime. Now you gather information to find out if potentially they might be thinking about a crime or committing a crime. And this intelligence-led policing, they'll gather up private information, health information, and unfortunately they're targeting activists, First Amendment constitutionally protected activity. The suspicious activity, the nationwide suspicious activity reporting initiative is calling on local law enforcement across the country to fill out suspicious activity reports when they, for example, in L.A., which is the model city, when someone is quote-unquote espousing extremist views, law enforcement are trained to fill out suspicious activity reports in some cities. Of course, the Department of Homeland Security, in their document from 2009, Department of Homeland Security, right-wing extremism, resurgence, and radicalization, this was actually carried out by a bill that there was a lot of chatter about back in the day, 2006 or 2007, about the Homegrown Modernization Terror Act. These are carried out as studies. But either way, that document, the right-wing extremism document, defined right-wing extremism as those individuals or organizations that reject federal authority in favor of local or state government, or those groups that are against a government altogether. And, of course, that's a wide range of activist organizations. So you can see if someone is espousing extremist views on the street corner, they could potentially be put in these suspicious activity reporting databases. We even have internal documents that say they call on them to gather information when someone is distributing radical literature in public, or when someone is making comments regarding common law or government conspiracy theories. And it gets really bad. So unfortunately, they're putting a chilling effect on First Amendment activities. We went through Arizona, the first stop on our Operation Defuse tour, and visited the Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center, the ACTIC. And we met with one of the managers of the place, a woman, and she told us, I asked her, if I were to organize a rally in Arizona and Phoenix, would you guys run my name through a database if you were to come across my name as an organizer of an upcoming rally? And she said, well, sure, we got to make sure that the group isn't going to come in and do something crazy. Well, it's interesting. We later revealed some documents at the National Fusion Center conference. We came across some documents. It's the same David L. Carter guy. They recommend that law enforcement intelligence go into activist organizations and gather information, again, to establish criminal predicate if they're holding organizations or holding rallies in the area. And they call on them to gather a whole list of information from name to the political beliefs or the political agenda of the group, even to gather the mood of the organization. So it's a whole array. These fusion centers are being utilized for that, and unfortunately it's a global to local, federal to local, bypassing state, bypassing legislative oversight, implementing these types of information gathering activities on those individuals who are speaking out against the status quo, the establishment. And it's interesting how the Anti-Defamation League and the SPLC come into play because, for example, the ADL provides a lot of research and training, and in fact, Catherine uncovered straight up plagiarism in many of the MIAC documents that they got from the open records request. The ADL also provides intelligence and research for the North Central Texas Fusion System here in Collin County, Texas. It's a regional fusion center for like 35 plus counties. It's also the nationwide strategic stockpile for the swine flu vaccine. Fusion centers also implement this health aspect. Regardless, besides that, they actually put out a report that was making it seem like a terrible thing that Americans across the country are becoming more tolerant of Islamic practices like foot baths in some public places, for example. And then they went on to say that law enforcement should be aware of the activities of organizations such as Answer, Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. They even went on to name Cynthia McKinney, who's a star congresswoman who stood up against Donald Rumsfeld and was there searching for truth in the early days after 9/11. And you notice that the organizations that they target are anti-war groups. They're pro-Palestinian peace and solidarity groups. So you have the ADL, which obviously has a pro-Israel bias, coming in and encouraging local law enforcement to keep tabs on organizations and activist groups that are opposed to Israeli incursions in Palestine. So you see how the politics can play out through this fusion center apparatus, and it's rather alarming.
Well, okay, so I just wanted to let our audience know that from the very instant I heard the name, I relabeled the name of the office, and for me, for at least the last, 8 years, I think, it's been called the Department of Homeland Gestapo. Let's just get that one out of the way. Okay, yep. So you're talking about the ADL and Southern Poverty Law Center. I have had my suspicions about that group or those groups in the past because I had a website up and I used to get unfriendly email from supporters of those groups. And as recently as last week, David Icke on the Alex Jones show kind of repeated my suspicion is that the SPLC and the ADL are Mossad fronts. And I've kind of looked into the funding of these guys, and don't they have Israeli funding primarily?
Well, the ADL certainly does. I'm not 100% sure, and I couldn't speak on the SPLC. I do know that they are involved in some very nasty activities, specifically the tactic of marginalization. which of course tyrants do throughout history. Hitler, for example, and Goebbels, they went through marginalization of the Jews and the Gypsies, and through propaganda got society to blame their problems on them. So whenever they went and did some heinous acts, the rest of the population wouldn't stand up for them. And we see the same thing happening. Of course, SPLC was all around the Oklahoma City bombing, which many believe was also a false flag attack carried out by our own government. And as soon as that happened, we saw an immediate marginalization campaign of the Patriot movement, of the militia movement, which was gaining strength and momentum in opposition to Bill Clinton, an establishment left, socialist, globalist, trilateralist president who was getting us implementing Agenda 21 and getting us involved in a lot of United Nations World Trade Organization shenanigans. So, of course, the Timothy McVeigh op happens, and then boom, SPLC is providing the same media talking points that we see them providing now. 10 years later, more than that, flip the script, and we have another leftist, socialist, establishment, globalist president candidate. You see a resurgence of right-wing Tea Party, constitutionalism, militia movements, and now we see the Southern Poverty Law Center at it again. Of course, they released their top 35 Meet the Patriots, and they detailed 35 people in the Patriot movement. And Catherine and I know many of these people personally. Catherine was profiled on this document. And it's very strange because many of these people, all of these people, are for peaceful constitutional change, acting within the system, acting in a peaceful manner to bring about a more free society. And you see the Southern Poverty Law Center, they claim their primary purpose is to detail the activities and organizations that espouse hate, like the KKK and Nazi skin Aryan race. But unfortunately, they are grouping in peaceful patriots who oppose the New World Order program.
Sounds like we might be losing your audio there, John. We might have to reconnect with you. Or are you there? Yeah, okay, we can hear you now. Okay, so yeah, they're targeting.
No, the audio. No, his audio's coming through fine, guys. Might be your connection, Matt, quite possibly. But okay. No, that was streaming fine.
Okay, thank you. So we saw this same attack pattern, basically, coming out of the Oklahoma City bombing that we recently saw out of the Tucson shooting, where they started right away demonizing critics of the government, whether you were peaceful or not. And I don't think this time they would gain the traction because of the Internet, because of activists like you and Catherine, getting the word out to people, ensuring that, people have alternative news, not dominated by the corporate media. So I don't think it's gotten the traction this time around that it would have back then because of the Internet and folks like you.
Yeah, I think the alternative media, the Internet, a lot of people, the government is losing credibility all across the board. They're failing to deliver on their promises, and those that still have faith in it are beginning to lose faith in it, and they're beginning to look for answers, and they're beginning to question things. And it's a wonderful opportunity for we that are at least aware, we have somewhat knowledge of what's going on, of this push for globalization, depopulation, total control, and it boils down to it. And we have an opportunity to educate these folks and to let them know that, the coercive nature of government and their willingness to use false flag attacks, and the fact that the mainstream media is basically the propaganda arm of the Anglo-American establishment and the Israeli establishment, there's a wonderful opportunity to inform them of that because they're open to it. So I think we're going to see a massive pushback, and they're going to start failing, and their tactics are not going to work anymore. And it's great. It's beautiful. Hooray!
Well, that's what we're. Oh, do you want to say something, Catherine?
Oh, that was actually John saying hooray.
Okay, so
spot on.
Okay. Yeah, so we got a question from the chat room here, and Catherine, I'd like you to answer this one first because We haven't heard from you in a little bit. They want to know what your definition of a free man or free society is. Catherine, go ahead.
To me, a free woman, a free Catherine, is a Catherine that is I'm able to live my life unhindered by other people using force, violence, coercion, or any other sort of threatening, manipulative behavior to change my behavior. It's me being able to do what I want, when I want, how I want, as long as I don't hurt another person. To me, that's what being free would be. To me, that's what freedom would be. What would freedom be to you, John?
A free society for me is an environment in which individuals are free to live according to their own ends, and where individuals generally subscribe to the non-aggression principle, in which they commit to not initiate aggression or coercion upon another. Unfortunately, the current system that we're using, even our constitutional republic, it seems to be inconsistent and incompatible with the non-aggression principle, in that they operate on a massive geographic monopoly of the use of force and violence. So I think that the number one thing we can do in order to bring about a free society is live as free people, and that means not participating in institutions which you believe to be immoral.
Exactly, and that's what we advocate here at UNITEDWESTRIKE.com, but not just on a local scale, not on a national scale. We're talking about the entire globe, okay? And I think there's enough folks around the world that know about the New World Order now. They know something's wrong, and it's the right time for them to be able to say, hey, wait, I count too. You look at the people in Ireland who just got into the EU and then were declared bankrupt. Now all these people, against their will, because they voted against it, are saddled with this fraudulent debt to the banks. So they're on the hook for all this money that they never created the debt for. It's going all around the world. So that's why we here at UNITEDWESTRIKE.com are encouraging, the whole world wake up like you described. So, Catherine, tell us about some of your run-ins with the law and how you experienced firsthand this police state that is coming upon us that we need to resist.
Oh, absolutely. There's been several. None of them have really been deliberate, I will say that. I guess the first time I really had an interesting, quote, run-in with the law is when I was riding in the passenger seat of a truck, and the driver, this was in St. Louis, Missouri, the driver was pulled over. They were doing the sovereign citizen thing and hadn't paid their property tax on their car. We used to pay property tax on vehicles in Missouri. And their tags were expired, and they had missed a court date, so there was a warrant. And I started videotaping the arrest. And the arresting officer was very unhappy when he saw me with the video camera, and he ordered the female officer who was on the passenger side of the car, pull her out, pull her out. And the next thing I knew, I went flying backwards out of the truck, and the woman snatched my camera out of my hands. And while she was trying to turn it off, I snatched it back, and I told her not to violate my property and not to touch my stuff. And what does she think what are you doing? And it de-escalated the situation, thankfully. And she gave me the keys to the truck and told me to drive it, somewhere safe and let me go on my merry way. And it could have been, potentially bad situation. I took the risk of snatching a camera back from a, quote, officer of the law who was behaving in a violent, unjust way. And I had it caught on tape, and she knew that. She knew that. And there was nothing she could do about it because she couldn't figure out how to turn the camera off. Now, the next time was at the court date for the person who was arrested the first time. So I was standing in line at traffic court in Maplewood, Missouri. It's a suburb of St. Louis. And long story short, there was an officer there. He was asking folks to line up against the wall. I thought it was a little ridiculous. I'd been standing there for a while, so one of the people I had, got chit-chatty with during that time, I turned to him and I said, get in line, show us your papers, give us your money, welcome to the new America. The officer heard me. He asked me to repeat myself. He asked me if I wanted to go to jail. I said no. I quoted the Constitution. And long story short, I went to jail. And thankfully, later, after open records requesting the surveillance tape and getting his oath of office and, you know, just really climbing up their backside, they ended up dropping the charges and actually writing me an apology letter, which was fantastic. And I haven't pursued it any further. So those were two, you know, where I took a risk both times. And one time I ended up spending a couple hours behind bars, but in the end, it came out okay. The second time, I was actually with John. I don't know, do you want to tell the New Orleans story, or do you want me to? Okay. We were in New Orleans. It was with Operation Defuse. There's probably a crew of, 8 of us that came down from Austin. And we were driving to a poetry jam. We had just been to the National Fusion Center conference, where all of the directors of every single fusion center across the country, as well as other high-level, you know, agencies like FBI, they all show up when they have these big conferences, and there's all these vendors, you know, selling, you know, license plate scanners and facial recognition stuff and blah, blah, blah. Big event. And this was over, and of course that's a high-stress environment to be in. You know, John and I were each assigned FBI liaisons. We got in as the media, the Austin Free Press, and they actually assigned us FBI tags who followed us around, and they just literally introduced us, these will be your media liaisons. And when we asked the women who they worked for, they said the FBI. And, you know, they for whatever reason, just felt that we were suspicious enough to follow us around, so they did. And that's a stressful environment. We're driving to a poetry jam. It's our last night in New Orleans, and John's driving a truck that has a headlight out, and we get pulled over. This poor officer had no idea what was coming because he was being videotaped by 3 people on the inside. 2 were live streaming one to Ustream, which was quick. Another was videotaped on camera, and one of the convoy cars driving with us jumped out, and there was a 4th camera videotaping from the street. So when they tried to ID all of the passengers in the car, and there was a refusal, because in these United States we are not to show our papers if, you know, there's not a reasonable suspicion for them to need to identify who we are. We don't live in a papers, please society, so we said no. And, of course, they brought out 4 police cars. They were walking up around us with flashlights, asked us to get out. I said, no, sir, I'm not comfortable with that. You know, I'm not comfortable getting out of this vehicle right now. There's no reason. The Constitution protects me from this. Long story short, the officers all drove off while John was reading the 4th Amendment to the Constitution to them. And, you know, John got a ticket for the headlight, but other than that, we made it out safely, and he has not paid that ticket yet. So,
oh, good for you. But, yeah, we don't want to have any kind of bench warrant submitted for you. But, okay, that's good. So it shows that standing up for yourself in the face of the police state, in the face of tyranny, can sometimes work. And so that's a very good example of how withholding your support for the system that enslaves us can be accomplished, and, you know, you live to tell the story another day. So I wanted to hit on this real quick, because you both were in Jesse Ventura's episode of Police State. Tell us what that was like. I'd like to hear from each of you. Tell us what that was like, and then what you think about the True TV network being told by Office of Homeland Gestapo to stop airing that episode along with others, and then subsequently the DVR companies removing entire seasons of conspiracy theory from people's DVRs. Go ahead. I'd like to hear from both of you.
I'll start with that. First, I'll give my response to the DHS telling them to basically censor it. I think it's funny. You know, they're terrified of 2 26-year-old kids, a radio host, a former governor, and a couple of video cameras. You know, that's what they're so scared of. They're scared of the truth, and that just shows you how powerful this information is. And I get a kick out of it because it's, you know, it's watching them squirm and run away. It's shining light on the roaches, and there they go trying to scurry back into the darkness and covering it up, just proving exactly what we were saying. So I think it's funny. For me, the interview was, it was very intense. I had 4 airplane rides in one day and stood on railroad tracks under excruciating sun for many hours. And I'm really used to getting into the nitty-gritty of fusion centers, and I felt at first I was kind of, I think my ego was a little bruised. Why didn't they ask me more in-depth questions? And upon watching it, I realized that most Americans would be not only mortified but unable to process the sheer amount of information and the depth of this fusion center system, and what they put together was an excellent overview with just enough, entertainment value for the mainstream to be able to watch and to soak in. My dad even gave me compliments on it, and that is a lot for me in my life. So I really feel like they did a really good job, and it was intense, but it was worth it. And I'll hand it over to John to give his take.
Yeah, it was great. It was great to work with them, and I think they portrayed the fusion centers in a wonderful light. They had Mike German with ACLU. He's great. And then took it a step further with the whole HR 645 and the FEMA regional detention centers. And I think that's one of the big reasons why they pulled that down. Catherine, after the SPLC Top 35 thing, the SPLC went on a big media push and blitz, and they had a CNN piece featuring Catherine, as well as Stuart Rhodes of Oath Keepers and Bob Schultz of the We the People Foundation. All of them were in the top 35 list. And they pushed back on Catherine and tried to label her, of course, this violent SPLC domestic terrorist, yada, yada, yada. But one of the things that Catherine managed to get tossed in there, and they even covered it on CNN, was this HR 645 bill. They tossed it right up there. The guy, Drew Griffin, whom had run-ins with the TSA and the DHS in the past due to his journalism, he got a nice little splash and objective coverage of it. So I think that's one of the things that's so frightening, that it's actually, it makes it real for people that are watching it. And I think the Jesse Ventura show has a wonderful thing going in that it's like infotainment, whereby they bring the truth out, and they do it in a manner that is dramatic and exciting. And, him and Jones were poking behind the bushes, looking at the coffins and stuff like that. And I think it adds something to really allow the mainstream Americans that, have that small soundbite, the television reality show mentality, to kind of really get smacked up aside the head with some really intense stuff. And even some of them that maybe barely participate politically, or there's Republicans that are involved in the Tea Party, they would watch it and think, wait a second, I just threw a Tea Party in my small town. Does that mean that I could be on one of these lists or potentially end up in one of these centers? So they had to yank it, and it just goes to show how eroded the First Amendment truly is. And shame on Congressman Cohen, and shame on the Department of Homeland Security. But it goes back to what you said earlier. They're unable to put that grip. It's out there. We're able to get it out. It's mainstream. The truth is mainstream, and we don't have to hide from it anymore.
Excellent deal. Well, hopefully UnitedWeStrike.com gets onto the Southern Poverty Law Center's list someday. That'll be nice, I think. Okay, so we've got a couple minutes left. Okay, and let's pretend for the next few minutes, Catherine, you and John are the hosts of this radio show. What is important on your radar? What intel are you seeing about what's coming down the road? What should our audience be looking for? Tell us, give us the news, and try to fill us in with what's important from your perspective.
I've been studying Agenda 21 a lot lately, which is a 1992 United Nations document on sustainable development. It's where we see all this environmental fascism and controls taking place in large part at the local and state level under the radar. Cap and Trade embodies Agenda 21. It's pushed for global governance. It wants to do three things: eliminate private property rights as we know them today. It would dramatically alter the political, social, and cultural fabric of the United States of America, And finally, it would depopulate the globe. Some say 85%. Their own documents, the Global Biodiversity says that. So something I've been pondering is how, a lot of people speak of the New World Order, the New World Order. Well, Murray Rothbard, he's, one of the founding fathers of the modern libertarian movement, very influential anarcho-capitalist. He would write about the fact that the New World Order and the new collectivism and new tyranny that we see isn't new at all. Rather, it's a throwback to the old order of feudalism, serfdom, despair, stagnation, where you had massive monopolies and everything was done to the benefit of the feudal overlords and the monarchy and the crown. And what we see happening now is a deindustrialization, a de-development, and you talked about Ireland before. We have the IMF, World Trade Organization, all of these global banks. And what they're doing is they are crashing and destroying industrial society. The Global Biodiversity Assessment, which is one of the Agenda 21 documents, it says in order to sustain the current populations of 5 to 7 billion, we would have to live at a peasant, agricultural, societal level. If we were to maintain the same standard of living that the West has and industrial society has, population would have to be reduced to 1 billion. So we see them doing that through the World Trade Organization and the WTO in that they're not allowing third world countries to develop. And of course, we know population rates decline and level off when that happens. And they're also pushing for these Agenda 21 local climate protection plans, controls, International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives to prevent growth and to slowly section off large portions of the world population. So that's something that's on my radar. Agenda 21, local cap-and-trade style policies where you have to start getting charged more for using non-carbon friendly energy or what you purchase. And they're starting to do smart growth developments, these little mixed-use developments where it's a public-private partnership. There's no First Amendment. There's no Constitution. It's a Constitution-free zone, little Soviet fascist areas. And I think there's a wonderful opportunity to embrace the Tea Party, to get everybody to realize that cap and trade may be happening at the national level. I don't think there's much we can do to push back on that. But what we can do is take control of our local governments and make sure that they don't further this enviro-fascism, the end goal is ultimately to eliminate private property, to alter the political fabric, make it unelected councils, no longer a democratic republic, and also, unfortunately, reduce and control populations. That's on my radar, Agenda 21.
Hi, John, it's Rick here. I'm here in the UK. I'm producing this show at the moment. And I'm a little curious on Agenda 21. I haven't done an awful lot of research on it. I keep getting people from the British Constitution Group who I'm involved with regular meetings with. But do you have a mail? Do you put out a mailing? If you've got a mailing list, can I give you my email address to keep me informed on Agenda 21?
Yeah, you can definitely, you can email me at contact@tagtexas.org, contact@tagtexas.org. And I'm currently working on putting together an effort, a website educational called whatisagenda21.com. I'm about to release a video where Michael Shaw of freedomadvocates.org, that's probably the nation's leading pushback on Agenda 21 right now. He's really paving the way, Michael Shaw of freedomadvocates.org. And there's a video of me and him confronting our chief sustainability officer here in Austin, and she actually affirms the depopulation aspects of the sustainable development movement right there in the local level. She says she doesn't appreciate it, but she affirms that it's definitely one of the issues concerning sustainable development. So it's definitely a wonderful thing. It's happening all across the country. Not a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing.
We'll have to get him on as a guest.
Well, yeah. I got that. But yeah, I'm looking to try and network some people on different things going on in here in the UK. And Agenda 21 is something that keeps landing on my inbox, and I haven't got time to research it with all the different things that I'm doing. But I would certainly appreciate being put on a mailing list. My email is rick.m@voteforit.org. And if you send out regular emails on this, I would very much appreciate being put on that list.
Great. Right on.
Okay, so we've got a couple minutes left. We're winding down. Catherine, what's on your radar? What's important for our audience from your perspective?
I guess food would be number one on my radar. I would encourage people to start looking at the disgusting level of chemicals and chemical additives that are being put into your foods at the grocery store. And I would encourage people to start learning how to grow food, so that way when our dollar and other currencies across the globe do start to collapse, which they will, it's inevitable, and that's okay. We're going to make it through it. But we have to be wise, and we have to move forward strategically. And, it's not only better for your body, but it's better for the environment, and it's better for your local economy if you start growing your own food and bartering and trading with people in your community and in your neighborhood. It really helps to build community, establish relationships with your neighbors. It's just a wonderful thing to do. It's a great thing to do, and I encourage everybody to get out and plant a seed. I would also say start to decentralize your income right now. So if you are good at making little crafts, consider making them and selling them or bartering them with friends. If you are a really good cook, maybe you could start making little meals and bartering and selling them with your friends. And we have to start building the counter economy right now while we still have the backbone of the existing one to survive on. So that way, when the dollar collapses and when things are getting hectic, we already have our own counter economy formed. We already know who's good at doing what and who provides what service. And the bartering relationships have already been established. People have already invested in, real goods, whether it's land or skills that they can use to barter with other people or, silver, precious metals, whatever. Just things that are real, that aren't fake monopoly board game dollars. And I guess those would be the two things I would encourage people to really take some time reflecting on, Can you feed yourself if the dollar collapses, and do you have something that other people want, whether it's a skill or a resource that people will desire once the dollar collapses?
You both sound like dyed-in-the-wool UNITEDWESTRIKE.com force members, because that's what we are. We are the strike force. You both talk about the same things we've always talked about here at UNITEDWESTRIKE.com, and it comes through on every show we do on the second Saturday of every month. Our audience and our host and our guests are all on the same page, and I'm encouraged by this awakening. Folks like you and John and us here at UNITEDWESTRIKE.com and the growing family that we have is encouraging, and we want to bring this worldwide. So once we get off the air, I'd like to talk to you, too, about, doing a banner swap for your organizations. So quickly, in the couple minutes we have left, give us a 30-second synopsis of both your websites and your organizations and what they're accomplishing.
Yeah, one thing on the radar, it's good for local activists and everyone to get out and meet your local law enforcement and these fusion center directors so we can overcome the marginalization that's going on. But you can check out Texans for Accountable Government at tagtexas.org, tagtexas.org, and that's our local activist rag. And then also the Foundation for a Free Society. You can learn about that at myfreesociety.com. That's our educational efforts to educate everybody about the philosophy of liberty.
Excellent. Kevin, go.
You can visit our joint fusion center project at operationdefuse.com. That's DEFUSE. OperationDefuse.com. You can, of course, check out the LibertyRestorationProject.org to see they're doing a lot of red light camera activism in different surveillance police states. And Tracy Ward, 4KC.com is a site everyone needs to check out, too.
Okay, thanks, you two. I really appreciate having you guys on. We're going to have to take a quick break here. Thanks. Stay tuned, folks, for the UnitedWeStrike.com Marathon. We'll be right back.
You're listening to UnitedWeStrike.com radio. Don't buy, don't comply. Ask why. UnitedWeStrike.com radio.
Baptize me in the water, can't you see I'm still your daughter? Standing with my vision once again. When we don't talk and we don't listen, we don't know what we are missing. And the anger in between has got to end. I've come for peace. I've come for peace. Let your anger release. I've come for peace. Let's stop spitting out this fodder. We both crave that holy water. I've come here in love, not to pretend. I'm willing now to listen, wanna know what I've been missing, and the anger in between has got to end. We've common ground, let's find it with the love that lies behind it. Lay down the angry words we can't defend. In the fires of redemption, there can be no self-pretension, and the anger in between has got to end. I've come for peace. I've come for peace. Let your anger release. I've come for peace. It's time to act. This war is pressing. We are